Hello everyone, I thought I would make one more video in this series about how to properly save out your image and then take it into Photoshop and sort of kick it up a notch. Now this is my final render. There is still quite a bit of graininess in here that I could bring down by going back in and increasing my samples. But in my case, I think this is looking okay for this project and this series of videos. This render probably took about an hour, 2 hours. I can't really remember. Probably somewhere in between an hour and 2 hours. So and this is the final render that I got. And again, if I wanted to make that graininess go away a little bit more, I would just go into Arnold render settings and bump up my samples a little bit more. So yeah, so we'll close that and we'll talk about how to save this file out. So there's a few different ways to save this. If you go to File, you have Export Image, Export Color Corrected, and Export Multi-Layer EXR. So basically what's going on, we have color correction happening in Maya by default, and that's a good thing. That gives us more physically accurate colors. If you want more information on how that works, just look up linear workflow in Maya, and I'm sure you'll get tons of hits on the Google for that. But basically what's happening is our image is being color corrected, and it's done so without any sort of gamma curve that's usually applied to JPEGs and PNGs and so on. So if we were to look at this original image, it wouldn't look like this. It would look ungamma corrected. So just to show you that, I'm going to save out, save original, and we'll save this on my desktop for now. And I'll just call this 3D original .png. And once that's saved out, we'll go to my desktop, take a look at that, and it's going to be really dark. So this is the original image. So what's happening is our view, our render view here, is applying a gamma curve to this. So we're seeing this with a gamma curve applied to it. Now to get that as a JPEG, we would need to go to File, Save Image Color Corrected, and then that will save this this version of that image, that JPEG. What I want to do is save as a multi-layer EXR because I want to bring it into Photoshop, and I want to take advantage of that information, that 32-bit information that the EXR has, to do some editing. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I already saved it out, so I'll just open up Photoshop, and we'll go to File and open that 3D type EXR. It's going to ask if I want to save the alpha channel as transparency or as alpha. I generally do as transparency. All right, so once this is in Photoshop, we can convert this back down to an 8-bit image. Now, I get a lot of, in the classroom, I get a lot of like, well, why did we make it a 32-bit image if we're just going to convert it back down to an 8-bit image? The reason is Maya is going to render the colors with the better quality if they're rendering out to a 32-bit image. But at the end of the day, if you want to put this on your website, it's going to need to be an 8-bit image because a lot of things do not read 32-bit images. So you'll notice that we have a lot of this information, and if I were to bring this into something like Adobe Lightroom, I would have a lot more editing capabilities because it is a 32-bit image. But we're just using Photoshop. We're going to kick it up a little bit in a notch in Photoshop. So to begin with, we're just going to go ahead and go to Mode, Image Mode, and I'm going to change that to an 8-bit channel. And you'll have this little HDR window pop up, and you'll see a little bit of change happening. But all you really need to do is, under Method, go to Exposure and Gamma, and everything should kind of pop back to the way it was, and then just hit OK. And now we have a gamma corrected 8-bit image. So there's a few things we can do to this to give it a little bit of an extra flair, extra boost. The first thing I want to do is go to Filter and look at the Camera Raw filter. And when that pops up, this is going to give us a lot of really cool editing capabilities. So we can edit the exposure, highlight, clarity. And I will generally come in and move these guys around a little bit to get the look I want, saturation, exposure. We can sort of change the temperature and tint, so more of a purple look kind of looks cool. I'm going to show you a different way to do this with just like a color overlay. Temperature there. So then we have other things we can affect, like the amount of sharpening. Obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. We can do a noise reduction, so this may get rid of some of our graininess that's happening there. So you'll see as I increase that luminance, you'll see that that graininess, a lot of that graininess is going away and kind of smoothing out. And using that in conjunction with sharpen. So I can do that. This little guy here is really cool because I can change like the hue of something on a very specific color. So if I want to change the hue of, like, say, my blues, I can go in and really just bump, and you'll see that my reds and yellows aren't changing at all. So this is a really cool way to kind of change up some of your color. Now if you do it too much, you'll realize you'll start seeing some of this kind of splashy graininess happening. So you don't want to overdo it with this. But yeah, I can come in and say to my reds or my yellows and oranges, and I can change those. I'm kind of happy with what I have as far as my hues go, so I'm just going to zero these guys out. And then you have saturation, so we can control the saturation on a very color specific level. So I can desaturate my blues. And I can desaturate my my oranges and yellows. And then luminance, so I can control, there's a lot of blues in here, so I can control the brightness and darkness of those. So some really cool effects that we can achieve here. I can control like the hues of my highlights, the saturation of my highlights, the sort of overall color balance. But some really cool effects that you can do in this Camera Raw filter. So I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see that that just smooths things out a little bit. The other cool filter that we have is the lens correction, or lens, yeah, I think it's under filter, lens correction. And if we go to custom, what this is going to let us do is add a little bit of chromatic aberration. So chromatic aberration is something that happens in a camera lens, not in the human eye. But it does happen in a camera lens, and so whenever we see photographs, we're just kind of expecting to see that chromatic aberration. And basically what it does is, as the light passes through your camera lens, it kind of prisms, and the different sort of wavelengths of color separate a little bit. So you get sort of like a rainbow effect around the edges. So this is what this color, this lens correction will do, is add some color aberration or chromatic aberration. So you achieve that just by offsetting two of these channels, figuring out if you want to do your blue, yellow fringe, or your green, magenta. We have a lot of blue in here, so I think maybe if I offset the green and the red, and now if I use my zoom tool here to really zoom in, we'll zoom into this guy over here. You'll see that I have this sort of separation of my blue channel or my green channel and my red channel. So I can kind of experiment around with those a little bit. You know, maybe the blue channel will look a little bit nicer. You don't want to, again, this is something you don't want to really overdo. It's just nice to have a little subtle amount of chromatic aberration. We can really see it now along the edge of that glass. And it just gives it kind of a cool little photographic effect. We can also apply vignette here. I'll show you another way to do a vignette, but this is basically going to darken the edges. This is something else that happens naturally in a camera lens. We're going to do this as a layer instead of, so we can control it a little bit better. These filters, once we hit OK, it's kind of a destructive process. So once we hit OK, we can only undo. So I wouldn't be able to open this file back up and edit this again. So you don't want to overdo anything too much with these filters. So we'll just hit OK. So now we have a little bit of chromatic aberration. The next thing we can do is add a little bit of glow to our sort of neon lights. So to do that, I'm just going to create a new layer. We'll get a nice soft brush and make this really big. And I'm just going to sample this orange color here. And it's going to look like I'm kind of messing things up a little bit. But we have a spot there that we can make glow. But remember that I'm doing this on a separate layer, so it's really not too destructive. And I can always go back and erase. So once we have that, we could set this layer to something like linear dodge. Or we can go through and just kind of flip through the layers. First, I'm going to really bring the opacity down on this so it's not as nuts. And then I'll just flip through our blending modes to see. So that one actually kind of looked cool. Divide gives it kind of like a blue glow. Luminosity looks okay. Color. So yeah, just kind of flip through those, see which one you like the best. I think linear dodge is probably our best bet, and you just really want to bring down that opacity because you don't want it crazy. You just want a little bit of glow happening. And we can flip that on and off to see the effect that it's making. If you don't like it, it's okay. I'm going to leave it there for now. I may turn it off. But you know, we'll see how it looks. So the next thing I want to do is we will go to we'll find an image on, say, Google. Let's look for something like concrete texture. This doesn't have to be a super high quality image or anything. We're just looking for something with a little bit of noise in it, and I'm sure I could generate a noise just using Maya, but we'll just say grab this guy here, view image, and when that finishes, I'm just going to right click and copy. So copy image, and we'll jump back into Photoshop. And Control V, paste that in there, Control T to free transform and bring that scale down a little bit. And I like to do this because it just kind of breaks up the flat colors in my renders a little bit, so it gives everything sort of like a dirty look. And in my opinion, the dirtier things are, the more realistic they look. So that's not always the case, but in a lot of ways it is. The more little kind of subtle little color changes you have in your scene, the cooler it will look. So, and then again, we can just flip through the blending modes. I'm going to say multiply or overlay is going to look the best. So yeah, overlay looks pretty good. And then again, I'm just going to take the opacity way, way down. So we just barely see, and it just kind of makes it look like my chrome color and stuff has a little bit of, you know, kind of fingerprints on it or a little bit of grime on it. And then we can try other blending modes once it's down in opacity to see if we like them better. So color burn. I think overlay is probably our best bet. We could always move the image around too to see if we can find some area that we may like better. We could scale it back up. Resolution, normally I would say don't scale up your images once you've scaled them down, but in this case we're just seeing such a little part of that image. It's only adding a little bit of color variation or noise in our image, so I'd say it's not going to matter if we scale it up too much. So I kind of like that. It makes it look like the wall back here has a little bit of texture to it. So that's one thing. That's another thing we can do to kind of bump up the look and feel. You know, at this point I can kind of take that up or down. I think we'll decrease our glow a little bit. So from here, another thing that I like to do is add a color overlay. So this will kind of affect the temperature. So I'm just going to create a blank layer, and we'll do a color. I'm going to say like a purple color. I don't know what it is about purple these days, but it's kind of been my thing. So we'll just fill that with a purple. Again, we'll change this to overlay and really bring down the opacity. And this is just going to kind of sustain the colors a little bit, bring them all together a little bit, and give it sort of like a general color theme. A really easy way to change this once we've created it is to just hit Control U, which is hue saturation, and then we can just sort of play around with the hue. So if I want to give it sort of a green overlay or yellowish overlay. I think green actually kind of looks the best. So something like that. And then we can do our vignette. So vignette's going to be done. We could go back and sort of do it with that lens correction, but if we want to do it in a non-destructive manner, we just grab our paintbrush and change our color to black and just kind of go around the corners. We can always use our eraser to erase this too. We just kind of go around the corners, and we could switch this to a different channel, but I think if we just drop the opacity, sort of give us the look that we want. Let's actually try a blending mode. I think just dropping the opacity will look fine. I just think I overdid it a little bit. So let's grab my eraser, or I'll make it easy. I'll just delete this layer, and we'll make a new one, and just kind of zoom out a little bit. So yeah, and just because I made all of these changes, or just because I can do all of these, doesn't mean you should. In my case, I kind of like the original image, how it looks a little bit better. I'll probably keep my little concrete gain. The glow isn't really adding much, and I think I like the other vignetting in better, which was in under our lens correction. So I think that's a little bit of a nicer looking vignetting. If we do something very subtle. But at the end of the day, if you can make all these cool adjustments and changes, but at the end of the day, if it's not the look you want, then you don't really necessarily need them. So in my case, I think it looks pretty cool, just the way it is. Maybe that concrete texture is still a little bit too strong. I want it to be very extremely subtle, and in all honesty, I think it looks better without the vignetting in it. So I'm going to undo the vignetting, and just having a couple little extra things is cool. Another really neat thing that you can do is just add sort of like a frame to your image. So what I do is I just make a shape. Then just let's see if we can get it to change our stroke width here. So then I can just kind of change my stroke width. But sometimes giving that a kind of sort of like a frame looks nice. Just make sure it goes all the way to the edge. See, that's not quite going to the edge. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed the videos. Again, I'm more than happy to make more videos if you have other questions or want me to touch on specific topics. I hope you've learned something from these videos, and how to design with type and Illustrator and so on. And yeah, so I will talk to you in the next video.